Welcome to Voices for Prevention, our August networking call. We have an amazing speaker with us today who I have had the privilege to work with in the past and some other V4Ps endeavors and activities that we've done. None other than Miss Gaby Hernandez is going to be with us. And I was so excited when I heard about her topic. I am a nerd at heart. I love research. I love to know like how these things come together. I love psychology. I love understanding how the mind works and why we do what we do. Sometimes I ask myself, Carmen, why did you do that? Like that ain't even like better, right? We have these habits that we're trying to break, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So I'm fascinated by how the brain works, but then also how to tie that into the work that we're doing as prevention specialists in varying capacities, right? We're here in different capacities, from our government agencies that are here to nonprofit community-based agencies that are here and everything in between. And we're all geared to school systems, education, but we're all working towards prevention, whether it's substance use prevention, suicide prevention, and we know there's a connection between them both. So I want to bring up Gaby. I'm going to introduce her. You all saw her bio in your email, so I want to just read it really quickly. Gaby is a doctoral candidate at George Fox University with a master's degree in clinical psychology. Like that alone, I'm like, girl, I'm impressed. She employs exposure response prevention techniques while working with her clients. Gaby takes a trauma-informed approach to counseling, integrating cognitive behavior therapy along with psychodynamic and gestalt theories. She is here to talk to us today on the topic of understanding suicide through Joiner's interpersonal theory, a pathway to prevention. Now, I gave you all of that, but I also know Gaby to be an avid knitter and a professional yarn purchaser. Like this is her thing. I've received in the mail an amazing gift from Gaby, from her yarn and her knitting efforts. So that I am she. So I say that to say, like she's fun and exciting, but also she's got this side of her that is deeply rooted in science and understanding the critical nature of what we do and how that's connected to her work. So, Gaby, I won't say any more. I will bring you up. Thank you for being with us today. We look forward to what you have to share, and you all please keep your notes because at the end there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers with Gaby and discussions. Okay. All right, Gaby, take it away.
Thank you so much, Carmen, for that intro. Amazing, beautiful. Really appreciate that. I will be putting my slides up and we can get started. Okay. So yes, I'm here today with my presentation on understanding suicide through Joiner's interpersonal theory, a pathway to prevention. Let me close that. Okay, so this is one of the most widely cited frameworks for understanding why people die by suicide. The goal is not just to understand the theory, but to translate it into a practical prevention-focused strategies that anyone, not just therapists, can use to help save lives. This can be a very difficult topic, so please make sure you take care of yourself. Take a walk if you need to. You can put your camera off and just have a moment to yourself if needed. To begin with, I'm gonna give you a little bit of more about me, even though Carmen did an excellent job. Kind of my way of just like who's talking to me and why are they talking to me? Do they know what they're talking about type of thing, right? So yes, I'm Gaby Hernandez. I am a fourth year in the clinical psychology program at George Fox. It's a 5-year program, so almost there, almost done. And currently I am working at Sankofa Counseling for my clinical training. I did that last year and I will be continuing this year. It's a really great site that I am really enjoying. Um, Areas of focus that I work with, I do lots of trauma-informed, psychodynamic, and culturally sensitive care. That's how I like to typically frame myself, but I have experience in OCD, anxiety, substance use, PMDD, suicide prevention, school-based therapy, and just trauma treatment. Research focus, I am working on my dissertation and exploring cultural factors and resilience, and all in a way to decolonize therapy. Some of my experience is extensive clinical work with adolescents and culturally diverse populations. This year I got to work in a school and work directly with kids, and I feel like lots of that experience is some of the stuff that I'm bringing into this presentation today, talking directly with them and how they view their world and see things and how we can like work towards making programs for adolescents. I'm also have lots of experience in suicide risk assessment, safety planning, and crisis intervention. My first practicum site was in an intensive outpatient setting where every day we were dealing with really high risk patients. It was really kind of an intense setting. We're seeing these people 5 days a week. And so every day we get really comfortable with language around risk. Why this topic matters to me. So I love therapy. I got into therapy and psychology because I like knowledge and I like learning, but also like I really see this as a field of that stems in love and care. And it was a way that I could love and care for others in a way that would, I believe, help them in a really massive way. So I'm doing this work because I want to reach out, I want to foster hope, and I want to make sure that people have tools and resources to help themselves and help others. Fun fact about me, like Carmen said, I love knitting and I love yarn. And yes, those are two separate hobbies. Last weekend I was in Seattle for the Flock Fiber Festival, and I have a little question for you guys. If you want to put your answer in the chat, how many skeins, which is like balls of yarn, did I buy at the Yarn Fest last weekend? As a little hint, the bag I'm holding in this picture is entirely filled with yarn. So go ahead and cast your vote, your answer to how many balls of yarn I bought. Let's see. Seeing answers coming in. All right, any last answers? So the answer is 25, which some of you actually guessed. Great job. Yes, I bought 25 skeins of yarn. It was an extraordinary time. My boyfriend was holding the bag for me, and every time I'd make a yarn purchase, he'd open it. I'm like, yes, thank you. More yarn. So that was a great time. But yes, that's about me, my background, where I'm coming from, and a little bit of where I'm going into as well. So starting with presentation things. Suicide, key statistics, and public attitudes. So suicide is a major global public health issue, right? 700,000 plus global deaths by suicide annually, and approximately 49,449 US deaths by suicide in 2022. Despite high prevalences, cultural taboos and stigma make it a difficult topic to discuss, which limits early intervention and support. Um, Openness and dialogue are essential for prevention, which um, is why we have these calls, is why we connect with each other so we can create a dialogue and have that openness to discuss it. As prevention workers, creating safe spaces for open conversation is critical. Now, barriers to talking about suicide, even for professionals. Yes, for professionals. And we're talking about the clinical psychologists, the doctors who are actually very uncomfortable. There's been a lot of research about this and how psychologists will specialize in that, but it doesn't feel like it should be a specialization, more so just like a part of their daily job. There's been like lots of psychologists who will like refer out if they have a patient with suicidal ideation, which doesn't feel right. Um, so even trained mental health professionals can hesitate to ask about suicide, often due to myths or fears about legal liability. It's very huge for them to be like, oh, I don't want to put myself in that position of getting, in trouble if anything were to happen. I got lots of this information from my supervisor from my last practicum site. He's like, that's how lots of people approach it as clinical psychologists. And he was like, but don't worry, we're going to make you very comfortable with asking the question, with getting familiar with it, with talking about it, with making safety plans. And he was right. I did very much so. Overcoming these barriers is crucial not only for clinicians, but for all community members involved in prevention, right? I'm a therapist specifically, but I was very excited to do this presentation because I wasn't talking to people just in my career field, but to everyone. And it's a very much a it's a community problem, it's a community solution as well. So I want to make this information available to all people, especially people who want to work in suicide prevention, to know more and see how they can make better programs or address specific needs. So this whole presentation stems around a theory, right? So why theory matters in prevention. Um, Suicide prevention can feel overwhelming because risk factors are so varied. Theories give us framework, a kind of map to navigate that complexity. Theories help organize our understanding and allow us to develop targeted prevention efforts that speak to specific psychological drives. A good theory also informs research, which in turn informs program. And importantly, it provides common language so the mental health providers, crisis workers, educators, and community members are all talking about the same concept. One of my favorite things we say in psychology is that we're all saying the same thing, just with different language, right? So when I say, like, I'm a psychodynamic therapist, and someone over here is like, oh, I'm a CBT therapist, we're both doing the same thing. We're not special, but the way we go about it is the thing that is different, right? And so when we're talking about a theory specifically, we're giving language. So everyone's talking about suicide risk, but now we have a language to come together and discuss it and understand it and learn more so we can act better. Okay, this is the theory part. Interpersonal theory of suicide. Get very comfortable with this chart on the side. It's on all my slides when we're talking about theory, and it'll make more sense as we go. Well, there are three components to this theory. Perceived burdensomeness and thwarted belongingness combine to create the desire for suicide. Acquired capability is what allows someone to act on the desire. Suicide risk is the highest when all three are present at the same time. Excuse me. So those three concepts, components, they're the three different circles. When the desire, so that's the perceived burdensomeness, thwarted belonging, meet, they have the overlap in the circle. And then when acquired capability comes, that's the middle part where it's very high risk for lethal attempts. But let's get into what each of these parts mean. Okay. Perceived burdensomeness. This isn't just a feeling like you're a bother, it's the belief that you are a net negative in others' lives. That belief can take hold in situations like chronic illness, job loss, or being marginalized, and it's often hidden beneath the surface. So, the definition of this is belief that one's existence is a burden to others, right? It's perceived as a fact, not like an opinion or a feeling. Sometimes, we have feelings. People with anxiety, a lot of the time, they get really doubtful, like, oh, I don't know about this, and I'm not sure, and it's a strong feeling. At this point, the concept of perceived burdensomeness, it's a fact. They can see evidence all around them as to why this is a true thing, and that's when it becomes this concept. Perceived burdensomeness is a cognitive distortion. Someone believes they're a burden, even if that belief isn't true. This is often tied to depression, disability, unemployment, or high conflict relationships. It's important to note this belief can be very resistant to reassurance unless it's accompanied by action or experiences that generally make the person feel valued. So they could have people telling them like, no, 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 you're so important to us. Like it's really important you're here, right? But unless they're seeing these things like that, words being into action, it's not going to be believed, right? Because they're past the part of feeling and just saying the facts. So they would need really hard factual things to help them understand that idea. So some examples of perceived burdensomeness in youth specifically are feeling like a failure academically or socially, believing family or peers would be better off without them, or experiencing stigma or rejection due to identity, typically in an LGBTQ plus population. Adolescents often struggle with self-worth and feel like they don't meet expectations, which can lead to feeling like a burden. Prevention can empower youth to see their value beyond setbacks. Okay, going to this next concept of thwarted belongingness. Humans are wired for connection. When people feel cut off from meaning, reciprocal relationships, it can create a dangerous sense of invisibility or non-mattering. That's what Joyner means when he says thwarted belongingness. So the definition is a sense of alienation, disconnection, or not mattering, right? Feeling socially isolated or profoundly disconnected. This isn't about like how many relationships you have, it's the quality of the relationships that are there. So yeah, they could be in social groups, they can be at school and around people, but they can still feel that isolation. Thwarting belongingness is about meaningful connection, not just a physical presence. They need to know that the relationships matter, not just that they have a number of people in their lives. People can have thousands of social media followers or live in a busy household and still feel deeply alone. Examples of this in youth are loss of friendships or family support, social exclusion at school or community, and struggling with identity without affirmation. And for me, that's one of the ones that stuck out to me. The struggling with identity without affirmation, they're in this developmental cycle, right, of really trying to understand themselves, their environment, how things work. And if they don't have someone there to kind of affirm these things as they're discovering them, realizing them about themselves, this is where that thwarted belongingness comes in, right? The loss of like, I don't think this is right. I don't think I belong here, those type of thoughts. So, especially for youth, social connections provide safety and meaning. When those connections break down or are absent, prevention must step in to rebuild or replace them. And this is why prevention must focus on depth of connection, not just surface level interactions. Okay. Most people have strong instinct to avoid death, but repeated exposure to pain, whether through self-injury, combat, abuse, or other experiences, can erode that fear and make it easier to attempt suicide. This is acquired capability, increased tolerance for pain, and reduced fear of death. Most of us have a natural self-preservation instinct that makes suicide very difficult to attempt, but with acquired capability, it develops when someone's fear of death diminishes, often through repeated exposure to pain, injury, or violence. So this is why like veterans, first responders, and people who self-harm are at high risk for it. Um, Especially developed through repeat exposure, pain, trauma, or self-harm. For me, trauma is the big one with this one, right? When you're continuously experiencing trauma, it becomes less and less like trauma, and you just get used to it. I am so close to just going into that trauma theory thing, but I'll just keep it short. Basically, with your whole body's response system, your nervous system, if you're constantly in an activated state and you just stay there, it's not an activated state for you anymore. It's just a normal state for you, which is where that um acquired capability comes in because that like fear, that activation diminishes and it just becomes your new normal. Okay, so some examples of this in youth are self-harm behaviors, exposure to abuse or violence. Those are really big ones because it's a very physical manifestation of getting used to pain. And then high-risk activities or trauma exposures. Acquired capability is a serious concern in youth who have repeated traumatic experience or engage in self-injuries. Teaching coping skills can reduce risk, which we'll talk about more later. Okay, those are all the different ideas. How do they fit together? According to Joyner, suicide happens when a person wants to drive, driven by the feeling like a burden and feeling cut off from others, and is able to die because they've overcome the natural fear of death. So many people could fit in this like thwarted belongingness, perceived burdensomeness, right? Those two top circles. The conceptualization there is how are they feeling in their environment? Are they isolated? Do they feel like they belong, right? But the aspect of able to die really comes with the acquired capability, right? It's that fearlessness about death or suicide and access to the means to carry it on. That's when we need to be more concerned, understanding that this might be an actual reality. So when we're thinking about prevention, we're thinking about addressing the first two more so, right? How can we reconnect people to their community? How can we reach out? How can we make people feel less alone, right? I feel like this is concepts that we do know about for sure. That's how we do guide lots of our program. I'm hoping to give a little bit more insight to how that does function. Prevention must reduce the risk for suicide and is also help youth avoid acquiring the capability to act on that desire. This dual focus informs program design. We're about to go a little bit more into the prevention side of it. I do want to take time right now and ask, does anybody have questions about the theory specifically? You guys can put on the chat or come off mute if you'd like to as well.
A question, Gabby, about trauma and where we are right now in this era of where we in society.
Yeah.
And I'll preface this as, and I don't know if it makes a difference, but I think in some ways it does.
Hmm.
I'm Generation X, who has been known to be that generation to like independent, we're gonna figure it out,
Hmm.
latchkey kids, suck it up, buttercup, let's roll,
Hmm.
right? And so in some ways, in my own sort of work and working with people or just in people in general, do we overuse the word trauma? Like, what is trauma? Is it something that we are to the point that now it's becoming uh, fictionable, even?
Hmm.
Like, oh, that's a trauma that triggers me. And so, people who are truly experiencing trauma, I don't know if we're really identifying that. So, help me figure
Yeah.
that out and not be own my own biases. And so I want to make sure that I'm aware of those and suspend those and correct those as needed. But
Mhm.
also, I realize some things that some people I think are calling trauma are light, like it's life. This
Yeah.
happened kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, that's a fantastic question. And also, I really appreciate your awareness around like maybe generational standing and how like people would typically approach it. But trauma, definitely. There's so many memes and jokes about it for sure. Like me and my sister will even do that, right? Something small happens. She's like, whoa, trauma. I'm like, oh my God, sorry, right? So it does get overused a great amount. The way I describe this to my clients is there's big T trauma and there's the little t trauma, right? So big T traumas, there's something that would fit within like a PTSD diagnosis. It could be exposure to witnessing death, natural disaster, or assault and violence done against you or somebody else, right? But I also ask about little t trauma. There are things that happen to us. So when I ask, like, hey, have you had any traumatic experiences? This can be big or small. What I'm looking for is something that's made an lasting effect on you that just kind of stuck with you and you can't really like lose that feeling or that moment, right? Because there are smaller things, right? My trauma professor is like has the big belief that everyone has their trauma, right? Everyone has things that happen to them that have just stuck with them in their heart and soul that once you kind of go in therapy, you're like, oh, that's why I act the way I do, because this was a thing that was always happening to me and hurting me in a way, you know? So there's definitely an overuse of the word trauma, but as well as it is very prevalent all the time. There's also complex trauma that it's not a DSM diagnosis, so it doesn't get used a lot. I think it's the ICD diagnosis or something. But that I love that diagnosis as well because it really shows the complexity of a person and their experiences, not in just like a PTSD way, but knowing that like, oh yeah, they had this type of relationship that really damage the way they connect with other people, right? And you can also go from a perspective of like how does the body function and the neurology behind it of like it's polyvagal theory on how like you get activated or really deactivated and you can't find your baseline. So there's a lot of different ways to go through it. I think it is appropriate to use it for a wide range of people. But definitely like leading that language when people are talking about it to like be like, oh, like what is that actually like for you? What is your trauma? Are we actually being humorous about it? Or what is the thing that's sticking with you? Maybe could be really helpful.
This was helpful. Thank you. So, what I heard and what you said was for me to get curious, right? Right.
Yes.
If they say trauma, what do you mean? What happened? And then like, yeah. So, thank you.
completely. No, thank you. That was a great question.
May
And
I
I see
say something?
someone. Oh yeah, is there someone there?
I'm thankful for your question. I'm a person that has worked in the school system for many years, and for a long time, you didn't hear the word trauma. You know, trauma is just really coming on the scene in full fledged. And I don't know if it's being overused. The word itself might be overused, but what I feel is that, there's not enough information about trauma for us to fully understand what is going on with all of us. Because just like you said, every last one of us experienced some type of trauma. I can remember my son died back in 2004,
Mhm.
and he was alive and well and talking, and bam boom, he was gone, you know and that was very traumatizing for me, but I did not realize that it was trauma because nobody had said anything about trauma, so
Mhm.
I didn't know. But as years went on and people began to talk about it, because I could smell someone who had on the same type of a cologne that he had, and I would go through those emotions all over again.
Mhm.
I would feel it. As I grew older, I began to be able to handle these things better. And learning about trauma and its effects and the characteristics is what helped me to be able to process this and put it in its rightful place. So I think the education of trauma, we need to know more about what the characteristics are, how it makes a person act, and it's different for everybody. I
Mhm.
mean, little Johnny could have gotten knocked down and beat up, and Sally could have gotten knocked down and beat up. Sally might shake it off and move on, whereas little Johnny is going to continue to process it over and over. He'll have some fears or whatever. But I tell you what, I feel like is being overused, and that is ADD and ADHD,
Mhm.
because most of those symptoms are undiagnosed trauma.
Mhm.
All
We
these children are not suffering from ADD and ADHD. What I'm finding out, and I found this out through experience in dealing with these children, is that a lot of it is just undiagnosed trauma.
Mhm. Thank you so much for sharing, Patricia, about your experience. It feels very, very visceral to experiences I hear about people who have trauma, and that, like, oh, I didn't realize that these were the things that are like definition of trauma and these symptoms, right? And yeah, it goes unnoticed all the time. We're getting more and more research now, but it's now becoming the thing that we talk about, right? Also, a note to the whole ADHD versus trauma diagnosis. Yeah, they function very similarly in the brain. So my job when I start doing assessments more and more is to try to suss out like what parts are ADHD, what parts are trauma, and how can I help this person get like an accurate diagnosis to help them understand themselves. Um, I just want to comment on some of these chats and then we'll move on. Marty said that Thomas Joyner lost his father to suicide. Yes, he has such a rich history on how he came to this, what his experiences, what motivated him to do more research. And I would deeply encourage, if you're more interested, to look that up and to read more. And Brandy also makes a really great point about someone's little t trauma could be another big T trauma. And that's so true. The trauma isn't about the event itself, but how someone responds to the event, right? What may be traumatic for one person will not be to the other person, even though it was very similar. And that's where we start understanding resilience, right? Our goal as clinicians, community members, is how can we build resilience for other people, whether that's just like coping, grounding, processing to have more mental fortitude, all these things together. And I think that's kind of what my presentation is leading to on the prevention part of it, right? How are we building resilience in our youth population and people in general? Okay. Yeah. So, translating Joiner's theory into youth prevention work, right? By addressing these drivers in youth programs, we can build resilience and reduce risk at a community level. So, we're going to focus on building relationships, identity, and emotional skills. We're going to have strategies that go beyond therapy into schools, community, families, and we're going to empower youth with tools for connection, purpose, and skills. Okay. So, specifically in addressing the concept of thwarted belongingness, we have building connection and identity. So, helping youth imagine positive futures and connect authentically with others tackles thwarted belongingness. Programs offering mentorship, arts, sports, or career exploration can provide these opportunities. Um, Thwarted belongingness in youth often shows up as feeling unseen, unvalued, or disconnected from peers and supportive adults. We can counter this by helping young people dream and imagine a future for themselves, something many at-risk youth struggle to do. This part feels very important to me. I talk to so many kids who don't have dreams or can't imagine a future outside of what is right here, right? I feel like we used to have this narrative for teenagers, at least when I was growing up in like the 90s, early 2000s, where they're like, everything sucks, everything's terrible. And that was very dismissive at the time. Now we have better understanding of like, that is what they're feeling. This is all they know. It feels detrimental and it's very big. They're going through a lot of things, right? But to help them kind of ground them in like dreaming is a beautiful thing, right? Having imagination, getting to like instill that so that they can see something different. And this could look in many different ways, right? I think that introducing kids to different career paths, because there's so many careers, it's crazy. They don't know all the careers. I don't know all the careers out there, right? But trying to get them connected to something that feels authentic to them, right? I know when I was growing up, the millennials, it was like, go to college and you're going to be set for life. That wasn't, it didn't feel completely true now that we did this. And it's like, we don't feel like we're set up, right? Now I feel like it's being built, opened up more to like go to college, go to trade school, become a YouTuber, be an influencer, right? But like, how do you actually do these things practically, right? How can you really envision a future or career path and put your creativity and put your best skills into it, right? The idea here is to foster that, whether that's showing them different careers, different life possibilities, having them have role models beyond their immediate environment and making those connections. Another aspect is encouraging hobbies and providing access to resources or classes create shared interests and positive peer groups. This is where my hobby comes in, right? Knitting is amazing for this, right? I have my own coping skill. I have something that grounds me. I will just sit there and knit, and then it kind of brings me back for all my stress and everything, and I can be able to re-engage in the need to do. It's a great skill. It's also an amazing community, right? There's so many people online who don't only make tutorials, but they also make videos just talking about knitting and just talking about yarn. I went to this festival last weekend and there's so many people who have it's a very open place to talk about mental health and to make connections. And that's what the hobbies do, right? Video gaming as well does this a lot for people, right? They are able to connect with people online to talk about things they're interested in, have groups that they played, and beat these really big bosses and stuff, right? That make them feel grounded and connected to something. Hobbies is such a big thing for me and something that I deeply encourage. And hobbies can look like a lot of different things, right? Most importantly, fostering quality relationships, whether through mentorship programs, community gatherings, or peer-led groups, builds deep connections that buffer against isolation, right? So again, we can bring people to different things, but unless they have those quality relationships, unless they make a connection at these things, that's the part that's addressing the thwarted belongingness. Mhm. Just reading my notes, making sure I hit it all. Okay. And now we're going to talk about addressing perceived burdensomeness, right? Creating purpose and agency. Perceived burdensomeness is the belief that I am a liability to others. It can develop shockingly in early adolescence. To counter this, we must intentionally help young people find purpose and meaning in their life. This might be through leadership opportunities, volunteer work, or having a role in a team projects. And this is where I would like just stress community so much, right? Not only what you get from community, but what are you giving to community? How can we connect youth to the community and working, finding them that purpose and that meaning? School's not enough for that to be like, I have purpose and meaning through my academic studies. I was not like that, at least I'm speaking for myself, right? But, having that connection to like oh, I'm gonna go, like, sports teams are usually a really great area of this, right? I am a part of my team and I'm going to help them win, or I'm going to support them, or we have each other's back, right? That's all the things, right? Volunteer work, I'm really interested to see how teens would like really build this responsibility and purpose through volunteer work. I know there's been some stories of like teenagers that connect with animal shelters and those dogs, and they start having that concept like, if I don't go, like who's gonna feed little Burrito over there, right? The cutest dog in the place. Burrito needs me, you know? Pets are a great way to connect people and to make them feel that like purpose and meaning that someone needs them. So, giving them responsibility and letting them experience success builds agency. They see they can have a positive impact. Part of prevention is also normalizing and encouraging help seeking. When you see that reaching out is a strength, not a weakness, they're more likely to speak up before they reach a crisis point, right? So, I feel like that's part of like speaking to the responsibility. Why we have responsibilities to be there for people, we also have a responsibility to ourselves to speak up and say, hey, I am not good today. You know, I will need a little bit more assistance. This can be really well fostered in schools. Teachers and coaches can do this, you know. I feel like having that one person in a youth's life to be like, I'm not good, and to know that they can seek help, connect with someone on that fact is a huge point of prevention for this. All right. Addressing acquired capability and building emotional coping skills. So, coping skills can be taught outside therapy through schools, clubs, and coaches. Grounding and emotional regulation help youth tolerate distress and reduce acquired capability. Acquired capability develops from repeated exposure to pain or fear-inducing experiences, lowering the natural fear of death. So, for prevention, this area where skills training is essential. We can teach youth grounding techniques, emotional regulation skills, and healthy outlets for stress and anger. That's like the half the job right there for the therapist is to address these points, right? And while I hope everyone can see a therapist when they need it, that's not like so much easier said than done, right? But coping techniques, emotional regulation skills can be readily available. This can be something that we can make a program on, just a mental health program to help foster these things, to teach them, to have psychoeducation is so important in this as well. Understanding like, oh, when this happens, what are you feeling in your body? What's the emotion that's happening for you? How can you address it? You know, I have this big belief that if we can all learn emotional regulation skills, you're set for life. That is like my one human hack, right? You will be in so much better standing because you'll be able to like really rise and fall really well with what comes with your way. So these things they this equips them to cope with distress before they turn to risky or self-destructive behaviors. We can also address this by reducing risks to lethal means in their environment and by being mindful how violence, self-harm, and suicide are discussed or portrayed in media and groups and peer groups. Awareness of what is around the teen for sure can be helpful in this area. Okay, so integrating all three of these together, comprehensive prevention design. The strongest suicide prevention strategies don't address risk in isolation. They weave together connection, purpose, and coping skills so youth have multiple layers of protection. First, we help youth feel they belong through consistent mentoring, peer support, and community activities where they feel valued. Next, we create opportunities for them to discover purpose, whether that's through leadership roles, volunteering, or dreaming about the future careers and passions. Finally, we equip them with coping skills, practical tools for managing stress, strong emotions, and setbacks. These elements need to be embedded in everyday environments, schools, after-school programs, sports teams, art collectives, and youth clubs, so prevention feels like a natural, normal part of growing up and not just something we do when someone is already struggling. And that's the part of this theory that I deeply love. We're not asking them the questions when they come to us saying, I want to die, and being like, oh, let me address this now, right? This theory really is about prevention. It's acknowledging and finding these aspects ahead of time so that, I mean, me as a therapist, I can work towards those in my treatment planning, discuss these things, and prevent suicidal ideation before it even happens, as well as it gives me factors to recognize as they're happening so I can understand, like, this might be something. Let's talk about it very like directly and openly. So this approach normalizes mental wellness as part of healthy development and sends the message it's okay to talk about mental health and it's okay to ask for help. I think here's the part where I do want to open it up and ask, how do these prevention ideas feel? Is this new information? Is this old information? What parts did you find helpful?
Free to come off mute and offer your insights around this comprehensive prevention design and all this, the presentation Gabby's given us thus far.
Yeah, so I'm going to add something I'll share. So, as we've had our suicide prevention days at the Capitol, Gabby, one of the things that I've heard multiple times is we call it breaking down the stigma of suicide. I get if, and somebody correct me, Carmen or Esther, if I've got that wrong, but that idea of promoting self-help, help seeking, normalizing that. You had that in, you mentioned that. So I know we talk about that a lot. And I hope that message is getting out because I think a lot of people get stuck, right? And they feel like I can't talk about this. It's something wrong if I have to tell people. The whole thing about it's a strength, really. We want it to be a sign of strength instead of a sign of weakness. So
Mhm.
that's excellent that you continue to talk like that.
Yeah, and I would even push that, challenge that a little bit too. Like when we always say like, "Oh, ask for help when you need to," right? People are here. It's very hard to do that when you have concepts like thwarted belongingness and perceived burden, right? Like I'm a burden. I'm not going to ask for help, right? So that's kind of the challenging way of we need to think about like this is already operating in their mind. So how can we ensure that they have the agency to like feel otherwise and go forward with help, asking for the help, right? Making sure that they have those quality relationships so they know like, I do have that one teacher and I know if I say something I think that matters to her, right? That's where the incorporation between some of these ideas I feel kind of come into play.
So what would you suggest somebody if they run into an individual might be in their circle and some of these flags, these warning signs are out there. It's like there's sort of a disconnectedness. You don't see them having friends. They're not talking. They look withdrawn. How do you go about approaching somebody like that? Because they're not going to necessarily come to you, right?
Mhm. Definitely. And that's where I have lots of great theories and I have lots of great ideas and I don't fully know how to fix those things, right? How are we going to approach youth who are very isolated, who don't want or who are already in this point of those circles of thwarted belongingness and perceived burdensome, right? How do we reach out? How do we address? When I was working at the school, their social worker was amazing. She was constantly making connections, going up to kids, asking, letting them know, like, hey, we have a therapist now. Her name's Gabby. She would love to talk to you, making it seem like people are so excited to talk to them, get connected with them, that no matter what they say and what they're going through, like, it's something that we want to hear and that's meaningful to us. I think that's part of the approach that we could take to youth. But again, this is so much like I think brainstorming that has to happen after the fact, right? Like these are really cool ideas. How do you see this in action? And I think I'm just going to finish off the next few slides and I will open it up for questions again. So a practical tool we can use is called the crisis card. I personally like to call it my coping card, but you can use either one. A crisis card is a simple but powerful tool. It reminds youth of their coping skills, whom to contact, and how to have access when help, how to access help when feeling overwhelmed. This tangible support fosters self-efficacy and connection to resources, right? So it's something that you can really easily make for a program, for an event, and you can sit down and everyone can make a little crisis card, right? This narrative on the card here, I really love that this isn't just an just in case card because that makes it feel like if you're thinking of dying, now we want you to have this. That's not true. We always want them to have it, right? It's a reminder that the worst thoughts aren't the whole truth. So it's there anytime. Um, so you would write who to call when you feel alone. I do this with my clients, put their name and their number. We want all the information on one card so you never have to go, okay, I need to call Bob, but I have to look up his number. Have it all on a card. You write why I still matter. It could be a short phrase or a photo. And I can't tell you when I bring this up to my kiddos, they kind of go, whoa, that's a big one. And I'm like, you're right. That is a really big one, right? Let's take our time in thinking about this. Why do you think you still matter? What are those parts that keep you here, that get you excited, right? Sometimes it's hard for them to think of them. Sometimes people are in very low places. But but there is something, right? Whether you can foster dreaming, imagination, desire for the future, people they have, pets they have, hobbies they have, right? All they need is one thing to make them feel connected and grounded. And that's, a big part of this. What helps ground me in the moment? This is where skills come in a little bit more, knowing that they can practice box breathing or they can engage in an activity to help bring them down and ground them again, right? This is where the mental health psychoeducation kind of comes in and that they can write to remind themselves. And lastly, emergency numbers that I choose to use. That is a very important part as well, that they need to like not feel like, oh, I have to put this number down. But I'm like, no, I want you to feel comfortable and like this is a number I can go to, right? Even calling that number with them so that they can hear what it sounds like. And just talking to the operator, I'm like, hi, I'm here with so and so, and we're just seeing what it's like to make a call to this number. That can really remove some of that fear as well. And here are the resources and crisis contacts that a few that I found. I know Georgia has specific ones as well. And that link I also found was a huge list of resources in Georgia, which I thought was really cool. My desire when I'm a complete professional and I've graduated is to have like my business card and on the opposite side of my business card have all like numbers and the resources. It's very important to me to have something easy, accessible to give to people and be like, here's the information you need, my information, and other resources to use. Please use them. So having cards like this easily distributed, I think is a really good idea. Okay, the last part of this whole thing to me is the relational aspect, right? I'm a very much psychodynamic relational therapist. Relational therapy's core protective factor is the healing relationship. Extends beyond clinics, coaches, mentors, and educators create safe spaces where you feel valued and understood, which is itself an intervention. Some of the best advice I've got as I'm learning to be a therapist is that you're in the room with them, the relationship that you guys have and the fact that you are present is changing. That matters, right? That person can know that they can come to you and that that's their space and they have someone is the thing that matters. So, and that's the change in therapy, right? It's weird because we like know therapy works, but we don't know why therapy works. And people do a ton of different things and we can like measure change, but we don't can't like put the finger on the thing. And the biggest part that we're able to like find what makes therapy so good is the relationship between the client and the therapist. The fact that they have someone with them. So just being in a room really does matter. And while that's a therapy concept, I would argue that's deeply human to be with people, to connect with people. All right. Joiner's theory provides a clear roadmap for youth suicide prevention by intentionally building belonging, purpose, and coping by creating relational spaces, and we can reduce risk and save lives through these things. This is this is the end of my presentation. I want to open it again for any other questions you have, comments, anything about anything I talked about.
Yes, Gaby, I'm back. I have another question. Especially
Mhm.
since it's connected to flight, it's bringing theory to life in youth. It seems like this could also work with adults. Would you agree? And how so?
Yes. I mean, I feel like this is a very human theory that understands how human behavior works. I was really excited to adapt it to a youth population because I know that's what most people here are working with, and it's what I've been working with the past year. And that's why the theory is so good. It addresses humans and people and how we function, how we work, and it's very applicable to all type of groups, right? Youth, adults, different cultural groups, LGBTQ population. Actually, my colleague did his dissertation on a theoretical concept about suicide assessment and awareness around LGBTQ and joiners theory, bringing those two aspects together. So that's why the theory is so cool because you can pick anything and just bring it together to have a more rounded understanding of that.
Nice. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions for Gaby or comments?
I
Brandy
wanted
has a
to
great message for you in the chat, Gaby.
I wanted to first of all, I'm impressed and just she's just incredible. Um, I know that Marty put some information about sources of strength in the chat. And for those of you that are aware, Georgia is one of the states that really has supported and pushed sources of strength in the schools. And that's a program that focuses on some of these concepts that Gabby was just talking about. I as I listen to this, and I know because I have some school systems that have that, it my mind was going into how can we do this in our prevention programs in the communities, with our youth action teams, with all the DFC, the coalitions and other ways that are outside the school. Because again, the sources of strength, if your school has it, if it doesn't, I mean, it's an incredible program. But a lot of these concepts really are in with sources of strength. But we really also need to see this in our prevention programs in the communities as well, I think.
It looks like Marty's saying sources of strength can be used anywhere.
100% agree.
Yeah. Are there any
Yes,
final?
I do it in
Oh,
I use it in wellness programs and workplace mental health. And because that's a wellness wheel that anybody can adapt. And I know doing this over and over and over and over again now for years, I feel like it's helped me personally with some things in my life. And so it's a wonderful, and now there's wellness for teachers, and anybody could adapt that for your organization. Just go to the Sources of Strength website, sign up for it, and they, can send someone to you. It's a wonderful wellness program for adults as well. So it's, it's just presented a little differently, but those 8 things on that wheel apply to all of us. We all need that. And every single thing you talked about, Gaby, is in that, is in that training. That's why it has the latest research from the CDC showed that it reduced the number of suicide attempts in high schools by 29%. And when you compare that to the student health survey, you know those numbers are huge. So if you don't know about it, you just find it online. It'll share. And I know, Esther, you were with me in training, weren't you? Weren't
I
you in that
was,
training? Very
I was.
quickly? Yeah. So I know you understand and know the value of that
Yeah.
program and how effective it really, really is. And some of the best evaluators in the country were involved in evaluating that program. Great.
any final? We have a few minutes left. Any final comments or messages from to Gaby or questions for Gaby? Giving time for everybody to find that mute button, the unmute button.
Well, I did
looking.
put my email on the screen. If you do have further questions, would like to connect about them, I can also make my slides available. As we are talking about this, I was like, I feel like I should add more of this idea, right? For me, the one thing I would change about my presentation is adding more concepts of resilience. My dissertation is literally about resilience. I'm like, why didn't you put that in here a bit more? So maybe I'll update this more in the future. But for now, if you would like access to this or have questions for me, that's all right there.
And we can have you
The only
back.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Carmen.
Oh, good.
We're like this.
Yes.
We're like this. We definitely would like Gabby to come back and maybe give us a second portion of this and maybe go into more detail with the resilience and just other concepts. She is just very informed in this and has a lot of experience now. And she started with V4P when she was out of high school. So she worked for us for a little bit and we've seen her grow. And so we're very, very proud of her and we're happy that she's able to come back and share this information with us.
Yes, indeed. I guess we're gonna close it out now. Are there any announcements that we need to be aware of from V4P, Esther?
Not right now. We will be doing a member survey, so you may be receiving that via email. Every year, we like to do a member survey to get some feedback about what topics and about activities and things like that. That should be coming out in September. Not sure exactly when, but other than that, we're finishing up and getting ready for the next big events.
Awesome. Well, thank you all again for joining. Thank you again, Gabby, for your heartfelt and putting this presentation together. I could feel like this is your jam, as I would say. I did mention I'm Generation X, right? So I still say this is your jam. So that this is your thing. This is yeah, and so it's powerful. So thank you for sharing your research with us, and we look forward to having you back at some point real soon. Thank you again, everyone. If you wanted to put your information in the chat, I hope you all did that. I meant to mention that earlier to stay connected. If there's certain people in here that you like, hey, I might need to connect with this person because of something they shared, we want to make sure that you have that available. And that's why we have these sessions, right? For us to network, for us to talk, for us to share and connect with one another. So I won't hold us any longer. We're at our 3 minute hour mark to 3 o'clock Eastern time. So thank you all again. I see things going in the chat. And again, this will be available on YouTube. Give us a few days to get it uploaded. I know everybody's on the edge of their seat to get more information about this, but Gabby's given us her information so you can reach out to her. And then there's always reaching out to V4P. The website is V4PGA.org. All right. With that, we're signing off. Have an amazing day.